Hello everyone. In this video, I'll be talking about tonsillectomy. Now, tonsillectomy is a very common surgery performed in ENT, especially in children. So, in this video, we'll be talking about the indications of tonsillectomy, the contraindications of tonsillectomy, the different methods by which tonsillectomy is done, and the uh, complications of tonsillectomy. So, first, we start with indications of tonsillectomy. So, the indications of tonsillectomy can be either local indications. Local indications means there is some pathology in the tonsils, or focal indications in which the tonsil act as a septic foci, or some general indications. And finally, when tonsillectomy is done as an approach for certain other surgeries. So we'll see each indication one by one. Now the local indications for tonsillectomy, these are the most common indications for which tonsillectomy is done. And in the local indications, the first is recurrent tonsillitis. Now, by definition, recurrent tonsillitis means 7 attacks of tonsillitis in 1 year, or 5 attacks in 2 consecutive years, or 3 attacks in 3 consecutive years, with the loss of at least 15 days of school or work. So that constitutes the recurrent tonsillitis. So if a patient falls in this category, then he requires tonsillectomy. Second is chronic tonsillitis, in which there is halitosis or bad smell. Now, there are certain signs or 3 cardinal signs of chronic tonsillitis. First is that flushing of the anterior pillar, that is, there is congestion of the anterior pillar. Second is on pressing the tonsil, some cheesy material comes out from the crypts, white cheesy material. And third sign is jugulo-digastric lymph nodes are enlarged. So on palpation of the neck, we feel the enlarged jugulo-digastric lymph nodes. So if these 3 signs are present, then it is indicative of chronic tonsillitis and it requires tonsillectomy. Then quinsy, another indication is quinsy. Quinsy means peritonsillar abscess. Now, as such, tonsillectomy is not done during an attack of quinsy, but after 3 or 4 weeks after the subsidence of the attack of quinsy, tonsillectomy is done. So such tonsillectomy, it is called interval tonsillectomy. Interval tonsillectomy, which is done after 3 weeks or 4 weeks of an attack of quinsy. Then another indication for tonsillectomy is chronic enlargement of the cervical lymph nodes with repeated sore throat. So there is repeated upper respiratory tract infection and the cervical lymph nodes are enlarged. It requires tonsillectomy. Then similarly, if there are recurrent middle ear infections along with the sore throat, so if tonsil act as a carrier of infection and repeatedly that infection ascends into the middle ear through the eustachian tube, then it requires tonsillectomy. Then if tonsils are enlarged in size such that they interfere with the respiration or swallowing or even speech, then tonsillectomy is required. And finally, sleep apnea syndrome. In sleep apnea syndrome, there are apneic attacks or cessation of breathing during sleep. So if the tonsils are enlarged during sleep, the airway may be obstructed and it can lead to apnea. So for that also tonsillectomy is required. So these are the most, in these also the upper 3 indications, that is recurrent tonsillitis, chronic and quinsy. These are, we can say, absolute indications or very common indications for tonsillectomy. So these were the local indications. Now some focal indications. Now here we see that the tonsils, they are the septic foci. So they can be septic foci for rheumatic fever or glomerulonephritis, because we know that these two organisms, these two conditions, they are caused by beta hemolytic streptococci, which also causes tonsillitis. So if a patient is having acute recurrent attacks of tonsillitis, then these conditions may precipitate. Secondly, some eye infections like episcleritis, conjunctivitis, choroiditis, they have also been shown to improve with tonsillectomy. Similarly, psoriasis has also been shown to sometimes improve with tonsillectomy, because in all these conditions, tonsils, they act as a septic foci. And some febrile convulsions, because of recurrent attacks of tonsillitis, there is fever and there are febrile convulsions. So in all these indications, tonsillectomy is helpful. Then general indications of tonsillectomy, if the child is not able to grow properly, that is failure to thrive or failure of a child to grow, In that cases, sometimes tonsillectomy is helpful, but caution here is that we should always rule out all the other causes of failure to thrive. And if we do not find any cause, then we can go for tonsillectomy. Similarly, if a patient is having, he's a diphtheria carrier, so tonsillectomy may be beneficial in that patient also. And finally, tonsillectomy is required as an approach when we want to do the glossopharyngeal neurectomy. So sometimes the patient complains of unilateral neck pain because of the irritation of the glossopharyngeal nerve. In those conditions, glossopharyngeal neurectomy is required, and glossopharyngeal nerve is present in the bed of the tonsil. So to reach that nerve, tonsillectomy is required. Similarly, in Eagle syndrome or Stalgia, uh, when styloidectomy is to be done through intraoral approach, then tonsillectomy is required. And styloidectomy can also be done by external approach in the neck incision. In that case, tonsillectomy is not required. But when it is done through intraoral approach, then tonsillectomy is required. Similarly, for sleep apnea syndrome, there is one surgery, palatopharyngoplasty or uvulopalatopharyngoplasty. So tonsillectomy is a part of this surgery. So these are some of the indications in which tonsillectomy is done to as an approach to reach these places. Now there are certain indications where unilateral tonsillectomy is required. For example, if we are suspecting any malignancy, for example, epidermoid carcinoma, which is common in adults, then the side which is affected, only that tonsillectomy is done. So then if there is chronic non-healing ulcer of the tonsil, or if there is any benign tumor, for example, lymphoma, it is common in children, or any hemangioma or any tonsillar polyp, lymphangioma polyp, so it affects, or even tonsillar cyst. So all these conditions, they affect only one tonsil, so unilateral tonsillectomy is required. And the previous indications that I talked about, that is as an approach, in those also, that is glossopharyngeal neurectomy and styloidectomy, mostly unilateral tonsillectomy is required. And also in tonsillolith, that is a stone is formed in the uh, tonsil, because we know that there are crypts present in the medial surface of the tonsil, and if the food collects there, it stays there for the long time, so there is deposition of calcium and magnesium salt. It acts as a nidus for infection, and ultimately it reforms into a stone, hard substance, which is called a tonsillolith. So in that condition also, unilateral tonsillectomy is required. So these are some of the indications of unilateral tonsillectomy. Now we move on to the contraindications of tonsillectomy. Now, epidemic of poliomyelitis. So we can say that this is an absolute contraindication for tonsillectomy, while the lower ones, these are relative contraindications. Now in polio, whenever there is an epidemic of polio, then and if we do tonsillectomy, then we are exposing the nerve endings in the oral cavity. And we know that polio virus gains entry into the body through fecal-oral route, and it travels through the nerves. So tonsillectomy should always be avoided during an epidemic of polio. Now, as our country is already polio free, so maybe this condition does not apply to us. But still, we should remember that during an epidemic of polio, tonsillectomy should be avoided. Then, if the patient is hypertensive or he is having any bleeding disorder, uh, any factor deficiency, or any leukemia, hemophilia, then tonsillectomy should be avoided. And if the patient is having acute infection of the tonsil, then also tonsillectomy should be avoided, because during an acute attack, the tissue is more fragile and more vascular, so chances of bleeding are more. So all these lower three, they are relative contraindications. Once these conditions improve, then tonsillectomy can be done. But poliomyelitis, it is an absolute contraindication. So these are some of the contraindications of tonsillectomy. Now the methods of tonsillectomy. Now in methods, there are various methods by which tonsillectomy is done. And there are two terms, hot tonsillectomy and cold tonsillectomy. Now, some authors say that hot and cold is based on the presence or absence of infection. For example, if tonsillectomy is done during an acute infection, then it is called hot tonsillectomy. And if tonsillectomy is done when there is no acute infection, then it is called cold tonsillectomy. However, some authors say that when tonsillectomy is done by any method which produces heat, for example, laser, for example, cautery, then it is called hot tonsillectomy. While any method which does not produce heat, for example, cryosurgery, so it is called cold tonsillectomy. So these are the two different schools of thoughts. So the different methods for tonsillectomy, they are dissection method, guillotine method, cryosurgery, laser surgery, harmonic scalpel, coblation, which is a bipolar, or radiofrequency ablation, which is monopolar. Now, traditionally and even now, the most common method which is performed is dissection method with instruments. And nowadays, coblation tonsillectomy is also coming up. It has the advantage that intraoperative bleeding is very minimal, and even studies have shown that postoperative pain is also less when coblation is used. However, in this video, I'll be describing the dissection method for tonsillectomy. So tonsillectomy can be done under local anesthesia as well as general anesthesia. However, general anesthesia is more preferred, and tonsillectomy is done in a position which is called Rose position, as can be seen in this figure. So here a sandbag is kept below the shoulders of the patient and a ring is kept below the head of the patient. The importance of this position is that during tonsillectomy, whatever secretions and bleeding will be there, it will be collected in the nasopharynx and it can be easily suctioned out from the oral cavity. So though because of this position, the secretions, they won't go into the larynx and they won't get aspirated. So that is the importance of Rose position. So first is position. Now I will describe the steps of the tonsillectomy along with the different instruments that are used in this surgery. Now the first is, after giving the position, we anesthetize the patient. Now, as in this figure, we can see that this patient has been intubated with nasotracheal route. So this is nasal intubation. Now, the advantage of nasal intubation is that we get more space for work in the oral cavity. So whenever we are doing only tonsillectomy, we can go for nasal intubation. However, in children, generally tonsillectomy is done along with adenoidectomy. So when adenoidectomy is also to be done, then nasal intubation may not be better, because with nasal intubation, it will injure the adenoid tissue in the nasopharynx and it can cause bleeding. So when we are doing adenoidectomy also, we can go for oral intubation. However, for only tonsillectomy, nasal intubation is a better option. So after giving the position and patient is in the supine position, the surgeon sits on the head end of operates from the head end of the patient. Now the first thing is, we open the mouth of the patient with Boyles-Davis mouth gag with a blade or a tongue depressor. Now here we can see that this tongue depressor has a slit. There are other types of tongue depressor which are plain, but here we can see it has a slit. The advantage of the slit is that when oral intubation is done, so the slit will accommodate the endotracheal tube and it will not hamper the bleeding. However, if nasal intubation is done, then we can use either with slit or a plain blade. It is a self-retaining instrument. So the first step is to expose the tonsils by opening the oral cavity with Boyles-Davis mouth gag and tongue depressor. Then second step is, we hold the tonsil from the medial border with a Dennis Brown tonsil holding forceps, and we pull this tonsil medially. Now here we can see that this is the right tonsil, this is the left tonsil. So right tonsil here is being held with a Dennis Brown tonsil holding forceps, and it is pulled medially towards the uvula. So when we pull it medially, it will show us a plane between the tonsil and the anterior pillar. So this will be the site of our incision. Now we saw in the previous slide, we pull the tonsil medially, and then that mucosa at the junction of the tonsil and the anterior pillar, it is incised by knife. Now here we always use a knife of knife handle number 7, because it is more in length and it can easily reach the tonsil in the oral cavity. and along with blade number 12. So we should remember this combination 712. This blade number 12, we can say that this is sickle shaped or inverted J shaped. It is easy to put an incision in the mucosa with this knife. So a blade number 11 along with knife handle number 7, this is a combination we use for tonsillectomy. Now after putting the incision at the junction of the tonsil and the anterior pillar, the tonsil is dissected from its bed by this instrument, which is Mollison tonsil dissector and anterior pillar retractor. So this instrument has two ends. This end is the tonsillar dissector and this end it is the anterior pillar retractor. So here we'll see the use of this end, that is it dissects the tonsil from the bed of the tonsil. It is blunt dissection and that is why this method is called dissection method. Then finally, the tonsil is separated from the upper pole, anterior pillar, lower pole. Now it is only attached at the lower pole only. Tonsil is separated from upper pole, anterior pillar and posterior pillar, but it is attached with the lower pole. So this lower pole now can be snared out using an Eves tonsillar snare. The advantage of this snare is that it first crushes the vessels or crushes the tissue and then it cuts. Because if we sharply cut this tissue, it will start bleeding. But this snare, it will first crush the tissue and then it will cut. So it will achieve simultaneously hemostasis also. Another mechanism is that crushing the vessels will release thromboplastin, which will clot the blood and it will prevent hemorrhage. So that is how the lower pole is separated. Alternatively, this lower pole, it can be ligated by silk sutures also, but commonly it is snared out. So here we can again see the steps quickly. Here we can see that Dennis Brown tonsil holding pulls the tonsil medially. An incision is kept at the junction of tonsil and the anterior pillar. Then with Mollison's dissector, the tonsil is dissected from the bed. And finally, with Eves tonsillar snare, the lower pole is snared out. So the tonsil comes out. Now this tonsillar fossa, it is packed with a gauze piece, and similar procedure can be repeated on the opposite side if we are doing bilateral tonsillectomy. Now, after removing the tonsil from the bed, the Mollison tonsillar dissector and anterior pillar retractor is again used, and the second part, that is anterior pillar retractor part, it retracts the anterior pillar and looks for any bleeder in the tonsillar bed. Now that bleeder, it can be either cauterized or it can be either ligated with sutures. So these are the various instruments which are used to ligate the bleeders in the tonsillar bed. So first we see this is the Burkitt's artery forceps. It is also called first artery forceps. It is used to catch hold of the bleeder. Then these two, Negus artery forceps and Wilson's artery forceps. You can remember Wilson by W. It is somewhat W shaped, and Negus, it has a single curve at the tip. So either Negus artery forceps or Wilson's artery forceps. These two forceps are called second artery forceps. So first the bleeder is held with Burkitt's artery forceps, and then this either of these can be used to catch hold of the bleeder, and then it can be tied with a silk suture. So to guide that thread loop, this Negus knot tire is used. Uh, Here the thread loop is placed and then it is guided towards the tip of this artery forceps with Negus knot tire or knot pusher. So these instruments are used to ligate the vessels. Alternatively, the vessels can be cauterized also. So this is how hemostasis is achieved in the bed of the tonsil after tonsillectomy. And finally, post-operatively, the patient is put in the left lateral position, which is called tonsillar position. And it is important because whatever secretions will be there post-operatively, they will come out from the mouth instead of chances of being aspiration. And left lateral position is preferred because we know that on the right side, the right bronchus is more in line with the trachea and it is somewhat wider than the left bronchus. So chances of post-operative aspiration on the right side are more as compared to the left side. Hence, the patient is put in the left lateral position for the post-operative period. Now, finally, we see what are the complications of tonsillectomy. Now, the most important complication of tonsillectomy, it is the hemorrhage. Now, hemorrhage can be either primary hemorrhage, that is during the surgery, which can be because of any injury to the adjoining structures like tongue, uvula, teeth, or if there is any bleeder in the tonsillar fossa. So, and if there is any primary hemorrhage, we have to identify the bleeder, or we can, so that we can cauterize it or ligate it. Another type of hemorrhage is reactionary hemorrhage. Now, reactionary hemorrhage generally occurs 4 to 6 hours after the surgery, and it can occur up to 24 hours. And the reason for this reactionary hemorrhage is that post-operative there is weaning of the effect of the anesthetic agents, because anesthesia during tonsillectomy is generally hypotensive anesthesia, and post-operative period when the effect or hypotensive effect of anesthetic agents weans off, so there is sudden rise in the BP, which can lead to slipping of the ligature. The ligature that we had used during tonsillectomy to ligate the vessels, they may slip post-operatively because of rise in the blood pressure. So this can be the cause of reactionary hemorrhage. And then there is also post-operative reactionary edema sometimes, which can also cause reactionary hemorrhage and slipping of the ligature. So if there is a minimal amount of bleeding, then it can be managed conservatively. If the clots are present, then we should always remove the clots from the tonsillar fossa, because removing the clots will allow the clipping action of the superior constrictor muscle, and it will clip the small vessels, and it will prevent the bleeding. However, if bleeding cannot be managed conservatively, then we have to again take the patient under general anesthesia, identify the bleeder, and ligate the bleeder. Then another type of hemorrhage is secondary hemorrhage, which generally occurs 5 to 10 days after surgery. And the reason for this is because the patient might not be taking proper antibiotics, or there is bad oral hygiene, which leads to infection, and the vessels become friable and they start bleeding. The treatment, it again depends on the severity. If the bleeding is minimal, then the pressure can be applied, adrenaline soaked gauze pieces can be kept in the tonsillar fossa, clots can be removed, antibiotics changed, rest is given, sedation is given. So most of the times the bleeding may stop with these conservative measures. However, if bleeding is more and it is not being managed by these conservative measures, then again we have to identify the bleeder, and we have to ligate the bleeder. So hemorrhage is a very important complication of tonsillectomy, and hemorrhage can be primary, reactionary, or secondary. Each hemorrhage has a different cause and different type of management. Some other complications of tonsillectomy are injury to the adjoining structures like tongue, soft palate, uvula, buccal mucosa, teeth, or aspiration and foreign body. Sometimes the secretions or the bleeding during tonsillectomy, it can be aspirated, or the loose tissue of tonsil, or sometimes adenoids, it can get aspirated as foreign bodies. Then there can be pulmonary edema. There can be edema of tongue, nasopharynx, palate, face, or eyelids, because actually tonsils are the lymphoid tissue. So when we remove the lymphoid tissue, there can be edema of the local area. Then if superior constrictor muscle is injured, it can lead to surgical emphysema. Then there is compensatory hypertrophy of the lingual tonsils, because it also forms a part of Waldeur's ring. Then velopharyngeal insufficiency can be there, in which the hypernasality will be there, which is called rhinolilia aperta. And if during Rose position, if hyperextension is done, then it can cause atlantoaxial subluxation, which is called Grizzle syndrome. In this syndrome, post-operative, the patient will have a neck pain with a stiff neck, and it can be managed by antibiotics and neck traction. So these are some additional complications. These are not very common, but we should know them of tonsillectomy. Now, post-tonsillectomy, the patient is for first 2 days, uh, patient is allowed only cold liquid water along with white vanilla ice cream every hourly, followed by betadine and H2O2 gargles. So this can be continued for 2 days. Then from the third day onward, for 2 to 3 days, the semi-solid cold diet can be started, and after 5 or 6 days, the patient can go for the regular diet. So that was about the indications, contraindications, methods, and complications of tonsillectomy. Thank you.